Good morning and welcome. It is 8:30. It is the 25th day of January 2022. It is 50 degrees and sunny here in Ventura, California, with a high winds warning, and they're cutting down the trees. I don't know why, but they're cutting down the trees, probably their roots or stuff, things, whatever. So if you hear any weird noises in the background, it's not chainsawing, it's the trees. So today we're talking about the time of troubles. This idea came to me from one of my viewers, a gentleman by the name of Adam Pebdler, link to him down below, who suggested that since so many people are picking on 5e, I should go back to the past and look at first edition and second edition stuff. And the first two things that came to mind were how come 5e hasn't done Pharaoh yet, and I should take a look at Pharaoh because it's one of my favorite older modules, and the Time of Troubles. The Time of Troubles was a 3-part adventure series that came out around 1989, written by Ed Greenwood and Clyde Caldwell and Jeff Easley, art by Brom. This was a series of adventure modules based upon a series of books that on the surface, it was a clever idea. But actual playthrough was horrible. And this is a perfect example of railroading to the point of terror. And sometimes books don't translate to adventures, and player agency being completely removed. Now, you could argue, well, they're modules, and modules are sort of self-contained little things. Really, as long as the players agree that they're going through the module, how much agency are they going to have? Because a module, generally has a beginning and an end. But even in fairly straightforward dungeons like Tomb of Horrors, there are choices the players can make. There are different directions. There are clever ways to interact with Tomb of Horrors and other modules. Adventurers might come up, players might come up with an idea that, the module doesn't cover, and then you've got to sort of scramble to figure out a way to compensate and make things work out. Natural 20, there's a secret door. No, there's no secret door. I rolled a natural 20, there's a secret door. Fine, there's a secret door. Let's roll to see what's behind it. I mean, yeah. When dealing with a module, player agency, how much player agency are they going to have other than do we go right or left? And how do we resolve this trouble? The Avatar Trilogy, the Time of Troubles Trilogy, again, good idea, horrible playthrough. Probably was a hint of the things to come that we could start expecting from Wizards of the Coast, because this was at the very, very end of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. It was about to transition from second to third, and the Avatar Trilogy on paper was how they were going to explain the changes from AD&D second edition from AD&D to D&D, whatever came next. Second and third edition, I think, right? We're talking 89, 90. So it's how they were going to explain the changes between the editions. On paper, hey, a 3-part adventure that explains why the rules were one way at the beginning of the adventure, but completely different at the end of the adventure. And this 3-part series explains those changes, and your player characters have an active role in the changes and are there to understand why things that used to be there are gone and why there's new things. That's cool. Right? I mean, it sounds cool. And, it was not an original idea because this was around the time that all the comic book companies were first doing the whole, let's restart our universe with a giant crisis or a giant, universe mashup. And some people will remember the old universe, but some people won't, blah, blah, blah. So that's what they were trying to do. The idea was, okay, we're switching editions. Rules are going to be different. How do we explain that? Let's have a series of adventures that explains that. And what is the story of this series of adventures? The gods have fallen to Earth. So the novels center around a party of adventurers called the Company of the Lynx and their search for the Tablets of Fate. Divine tablets hold the listing of all the gods and their roles in the balance of law and chaos during the time of troubles. The theft of these tablets was the actual cause of the time of troubles, as all the gods with the exception of Helm were cast to Trolley, and faiths and magic ran wild. So the theme was the gods have not been doing their job. The god above all gods is upset about them. The thing that gives the gods their power, the tablets of fate. Could have sneezed. Excuse me. Told you they're cutting the trees, so dust and whatever. I feel bad for the birds. The gods have fallen to earth because they've lost the thing that gives them their power. I mean, it seems kind of silly that something as simple as two, tablets, but the idea that is, I think, is more is like that they've lost their names, they've lost their pantheons, the individuals have lost faith in them, they've stopped doing the job of their pantheon, so they are being thrown to earth to quest to get their powers back by going through a certain task. Yeah, I mean, now you think about it, it's kind of a silly idea, but it was a great way to explain the change, because what if that god doesn't do his job, gets thrown to earth, has to be tasked to try and earn his pantheon back, but what if they succeed? What if they fail? What if somebody else steps up and takes the pantheon for him? Which, of course, was the theme of the books. If you read through the books, several of the characters in the book took on the roles of the gods. Midnight took the mantle of Mystara, goddess of magic. Kelemvor became the god of dead. And Cyric took several vile deities' portfolios and went mad. Of the three, Cyric was the most interesting, because the way he did it is he had a soul swallowing sword, and he would kill a god in their mortal form, and the sword would swallow the soul of that god, and it would pass into Cyric. So Cyric slowly was just sort of accumulating all these godly portfolios by swallowing their souls. So his makes sense. The other two, well, Midnight just became the goddess of magic because she was there, and Kelemvor became the god of the dead because of the task he performed. He's sort of a take on Osiris kind of thing. He died and came back, and by dying and coming back, he took on the role of the god of the dead. And Midnight was Mystra, because Mystra, when she fell to earth, hid in Midnight. A lot of the gods hid in their worshippers, or hid in their stuff like that. Some of them just on human form. So the modules, I mean, are a light read at best. They're not very clever, but it was an interesting idea. Unfortunately, through the modules, through this idea of, the gods have fallen to earth, player characters have to get the tablets and go through these things to reclaim the gods, or they're rushing the gods, or they're trying to help the gods. I don't think the module was written with the intention of you bringing your own characters into it. I think it was written with the intention that you were supposed to play Midnight and Cyric and Kelemvor and the other guys and gals through it. There were rules to bring in your own characters. There were rules to, how you would introduce this series of events to an ongoing Forgotten Realms campaign, and how your characters could interact with it. But really, the modules were written that it had to end a specific way. Now, here's the problem with the Time of Trouble modules, at least when I ran through it, and I ran through it twice with two different DMs. The first time took a year to run through all three modules. The second time took a couple months. And with both times, it was the same thing. And I didn't act, on any of the preconceived knowledge from running it through the first time, because I figured the first time we did it, we just didn't get it. And so maybe but no, it was the same both times. Nothing you did in the Time of Troubles changed the outcome whatsoever. The outcome was predetermined. Your player characters could go wandering off, do ridiculous things. Once I started, in the first time I ran through, by the second module, it started to become clear to me that nothing I was doing was changing the outcome. So I tried to see how far I could push this, because I was just so frustrated that nothing my character was doing was really changing the outcome. So my character tried to just knock off a god, start fights, do all sorts of weird things that the module didn't count for. I tried to kill Cyric before he could take on the sword. It didn't work. Nothing we did changed the outcome. Midnight was always going to become the goddess of magic. Cyric was always going to become the god he became. So that is what sucked. Now the idea, again, idea good. How do we explain that things work differently from this edition to this edition? Well, we have this series and blah, 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 and God's Fall, and some of the things, like my favorite, of course, being Lyra, the goddess of deception and illusion, who hid in the body of her sister and then faked her own death through the run. So even when the time of series was over, her followers thought she had died and she wasn't giving them any powers, but the whole time she was hiding inside the body of her sister's avatar, so the two of them were sharing things. That was pretty clever, that the goddess of deception would fake her own death. Of course, she did it like 3 different times, so yeah, she's pretty fun. So this is a perfect example of one of the 2 that instantly came to mind when Adam suggested this, and the perfect example of railroading. The idea that here is a series of events that nothing you do will change the outcome. And like I said, I played through it twice, and the reason why I went through it again, even though I'd been through it, was a couple years later. The guy had converted it to the current edition, and I wanted to see if maybe I was wrong, or maybe the way the DM who ran it the first time was wrong, and maybe I could change the outcome. But nope. The same thing happened. Nothing we did really changed the outcome in any way, shape, or form. Mystra, Celeborn, and Cyric still assume the rules. None of our player characters could become gods. I wasn't trying to, but I know another one of the players was. Nothing we did changed the outcome. So here's a perfect example of railroading, of complete lack of player agency, of just the utter frustration of placing characters in a situation where nothing they do matters. And we could argue for or against railroading. You can argue for or against player agency. You can argue for or against, how much leeway a player has, how much leeway don't have. But really, unless the players feel like what they're doing actually matters to the story, whether it be something huge like preventing the fall of a god, or something even very minor, like making sure a letter gets delivered on time, or making sure that band of orcs doesn't raid the city. If the players are placed in a situation where they feel nothing they do matters, no matter what you do, Mistress is going to become the goddess of magic. You can't become the goddess of magic. Before Mystra becomes the goddess of magic, I'm going to kill her because I don't want her to become the goddess of magic. Yeah, that doesn't work. She finds a way to come back. All the way down to, I really need to deliver this letter. Yeah, the letter's not getting delivered, but I really need to deliver it. Nope. Red Dragon shows up, burns the letter in your hands. Nobody's going to want to play in a game where nothing they do matters. I actually do not know why we stuck through the year-long time of troubles, and none of us went, dude, this is stupid, run something else. But, it was sort of like, this is the only group I got, so let's just make the most of it. And, by the end, we were just doing ridiculous, silly things. We stuffed Celeborn in a barrel and rolled him down some stairs to set off a trap, because we knew nothing we did would get Celeborn killed. So we took advantage of that. We'd hide behind midnight when they're shooting arrows at us. Like, what are you doing? Well, we know she can't die, so we'll just hide behind her. You've made it very clear nothing we do is going to change the outcome. So fuck it. When you've got 4 players all going, hey, let's roll Celeborn down the hallway to set off the trap, you should have known to stop there. But it was the same thing the second time. So yeah, just bad adventure writing, bad DMing on both parts if they weren't willing to bend the rules, and just an example of, some of the really awful stuff. Not everything that Wizards of the Coast and TSR created in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons were stellar examples of gaming. I know a lot of the people go, oh, the AD&D stuff was the best, and the 5e stuff sucks, and the Wizards of the Coast stuff sucks. Well, here's a perfect example of a series of adventures written by the man who created the Forgotten Realms that were just awful. I would never recommend running these, ever. The idea, really cool. That is a great way to explain the differences between a previous edition of the game and a current edition of the game. And I think they tried to do it again from 3rd to 4th with the Apocalypse Stones, if I'm remembering correctly, but maybe I'm wrong, because it's a great idea. But yeah, it was just a horrible, horrible way So there's my first review of the day. We're doing a second review later on today. Thanks again, Adam Pebdler, for this idea. We're going to keep doing this at least once a week. Take a look at some of the older, forgotten stuff from the first and second edition days that Wizards of the Coast have not converted to 5th. We'll probably do Pharaoh next because it's one of my favorite older ones, and I still don't understand why WOTC hasn't converted it to 5th. But anyways, there you go. If you like this content, let me know. If you don't like this content, let me know, and I won't do this again. If you think I'm incorrect about the Time of Troubles, which you know I usually am, let me know. At least I got the dates right this time, Shadzar. Regarding dates and stuff, yesterday I did a review of the forthcoming RuneScape tabletop role-playing game. I got some of the dates wrong. I also called it RuneQuest a couple times. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Dyslexic moment. But, yeah. Time of Troubles. Don't play it. Don't read. The modules were okay, as reading material. But, again, yeah, yuck. All right. Thanks, Adam, for this idea. See ya. I'm the god of Get Off My Land.